Hello.
Hey, Christina.
How's your day going?
It's going all right, thank you. You?
Good, good. I'm playing with Claude Design today.
Nice.
It's interesting, but very rewarding to see like what you want beautifully visualized right in front of your eyes is incredible.
Use a lot of tokens.
Ah, yeah. Okay, good to know.
Hey guys, thanks for joining.
Hey, Luke.
I'll probably kick off. I think I've probably got a relatively chunky amount of content to share today. I haven't run through this deck all the way, so yeah, I'm not sure how long it'll take. So I will probably kick off in just about 1 minute, and then yeah, someone wouldn't mind just managing the whatever it's called, waiting list, whatever, just in case someone does pop up in there, that'd be great.
I got you.
Hey guys who are joining. Cool, I'm going to kick off. Thanks for joining this one. This one is going to be about skills, and some of you might already be using skills already today. You might be using skills without knowing you're using skills. But one of the things that I think are going to be pretty essential for people to understand are what skills are, how they work, how you can create them, and how you can improve them yourself. Much like probably 2 years ago now, when everyone was talking about prompt engineering and how you had to be an expert at prompt engineering to get the most out of your AI model. You don't need to be an expert at prompt engineering now. You also don't need to be an expert at creating skills now. Agents are really, really good at like creating these things for you. But it is worth you understanding what goes on under the hood, because it will help you be able to understand when to use a skill or when to just prompt, or when to create like a workflow, so something that's structured in its output. I'll go through all those different scenarios today. So if you find yourself doing something more than twice, it should already be a skill. To do that, I'll show you how you can do that today. But what it enables you to do is get really reliable outputs from an AI agent or chatbot, whatever it is that you are generally using, and enabling the agent to make a lot of its own decisions based on what good looks like for you. A couple of the things that I'll show you later on how you can create your own skills will enable you to give that context to the AI as to when it should flag things to you and when you should let it just get on and do its thing. Today you're going to learn what skills are, how to build one and when, how to make your own. I won't go into that. I'm going to cover it all in the next hour. So what is a skill? A skill in the AI world is basically a folder that has information in it. And I'm going to dive into what is specifically in that folder in the session. But what you need to know is it's just something that repeats the same sets of activities using the rules that you've provided it. So you might be able to think, yes, a prompt, I could do that in a prompt. So with a prompt, I can write out all the instructions and I can get my AI to do something for me. A skill takes that to the next level. And not only does it mean you're not having to go and find that prompt template that you had before, it also means that you can actually go way further with the outputs that a skill might be able to deliver for you. It's basically like a reusable set of tasks that you can get an agent to do again and again and again. And yeah, Claude, ChatGPT, Codex, Gemini, especially Gemini Spark, will be reaching for these skills all the time when you ask it to do something. So I'll show you more of those examples as we go. So what does it look like? You, as the person, you'll interact with your agent or your chatbot. Just assume, by the way, if I say agent, just assume I'm talking about you just talking to Gemini or talking to Claude. Whatever it is, they're basically all agents now working on your behalf as opposed to like purely just chat-based bots. You'll send it a prompt, and your prompt might be, build me a title card for the webinar in the Algo style. And to be honest, I might do this. Actually, this is a good example. I might do this regularly. What the agent will do is it will go and find, it will look through what it knows about the agent, the Algo style. And in that, for me, it will find our skill that we have called the Algo brand system, which is like a set of packaged skills that will enable AI to create content for us within our brand. So this PowerPoint that you see here, this has been created using this skill. And what it does is it finds any skills that it thinks might be relevant, and then it leverages those skills to actually get the work done. So your prompt that is just really, really short and sharp, which is generally how they should be now, it's going off and it's finding those instructions, those rich instructions that enable it to do these repeatable actions again and again and again. What it will then do, the agent, it will reach out to third-party tools and services to get any additional information it needs. So in this case, there probably aren't that many tools. It might go over to our Google Drive to find a docs file, maybe that's documented in the skills information. But really, your agent will decide when and what skills get used and how it uses them most of the time. You can force it to use skills, but you generally don't need to, which is one of the beauties of skills. Prompts are generally the starting point for activities now. So prompts used to be your be-all and end-all of everything, right? And they used to, you have to craft and curate your prompts so they did exactly what you wanted them to do. Now they're actually more about just giving the information that's relevant to an agent to then go off and do things on your behalf. So a prompt only works because of what's in the context that you've provided it. So if you've given it all the information, great, then the prompt will work. If you go back the next day or you hand this same prompt to someone else, they might have a totally different experience to you. Whereas a skill generally tightens it up, and I'll show you why it does that. Prompts traditionally as well, you share them in a Word document, or you might even share them over chat. They aren't very discoverable. With skills, you can actually share them with your team. And I've actually pre-installed anyone that has Claude from using our account. I've pre-installed our Algo design set of skills in there so that you can leverage those from day one. They get shared with you. Anytime I make an update, they get updated as well. The rules don't necessarily stick. So if you have inside your chat window, say you've made some decisions with the chatbot further up, it may reference those same decisions that you made earlier to change the output of what you have. Whereas a skill really, really defines what the output should look like, and the skill will generally take precedence over the context that you have further up in your chat window. And prompts are just words. You rely on the chatbot to do everything else. Whereas, as you'll come to learn, with skills, you can get structured, exact outputs, and you can rely on those outputs, and there's reasons for that. As you'll come to learn, 6 reasons a skill beats a really good prompt. Skills are super consistent. So by codifying, by getting an agent most of the time to codify what information goes into a skill and what information can come out of a skill, you get these really, really reliable outputs every single time that you run one. You can share them with people in your team. Your decisions are written down. So the decision-making process that you normally go through to get an output, that's already codified in this skill. They can actually do things on your behalf too. So you can tell a skill to go and run scripts or open templates or create new templates or call connectors, all of this stuff that you can make these skills do. Whereas if you just prompt Gemini, you can't make Gemini go and leverage skills or run scripts or validate X. It will do that to the best of its ability if you tell it to, but you can't physically make it do that. Whereas with skills you can, which makes them so reliable. They are super efficient, and I'll come on to a bit about efficiency later in the deck, as in they don't take up space in your context on your calls that you make. And they're built to work together. So I might have 3 skills that all run one after the other, and one skill triggers the next skill to happen. And I've got a few examples of that later, just to bury the lead. When I'm building this deck, I have a skill that then validates that the colors and styling is correct. And then I have a skill that potentially fixes any issues that came up. And that happens in sequence. And then the output I get is very, very reliable in comparison to just asking Gemini to go and build something for me or Claude. So what deserves to be a skill? If you can match 2 out of 3 of these, it should be a skill. If you can match 3 out of 3, then it should be a skill already. It should be something that's already automated. Does it repeat weekly, monthly? Does it need any judgment? As in something that we couldn't just determine. And what I mean by that is if we're adding up 2 numbers, we know what the output's going to be. Therefore, we don't need AI to do that for us. However, the decision that needs to be made based off of a number of different factors, and it generally requires a human to make that kind of judgment at this point in time. Yes, it's sort of 60%, it's 70%. Then that is absolutely something that we should try and build into an AI skill. Or does it need to do something? Does it need to pull data, run a script? Does it need to validate some information? Does it need to update a system? If 2 out of those 3, then a skill makes sense to leverage rather than like a rich prompt that you might traditionally write today. There's some examples of types of skills that you may build on the right. Now, a skill, as I said earlier, a skill is basically a folder that sits on your machine. And now it will sit in a different place depending on what tool you're using. So if you're using Claude, it will sit in a specific folder. If you're using OpenAI, it sits in a different folder. If you're using Google Spark, it will sit in the cloud in your drive. But what it is, it's generally all the same sets of files. So you have a skill.md file. And I don't know if you've seen Markdown, but you've probably heard about Markdown since AI has become more and more popular. It's just a way of writing rich content with very, very little fluff. So if I had a Word file from Microsoft Word or Google, it would have tons and tons of additional information in there telling me exactly what the font is and how that font works and everything like that. Whereas this is just like 3 hashes, gives you a header. You don't need to know that too much, but this file, the skill.md file, basically tells the agent what this skill is going to do. And this is the only file that you actually require for a skill to be to work. The others are optional, but I'd suggest that you have them for most use cases. This means that when your agent decides that this skill should be used, it's going to follow this list of to-dos that's in your skill.md. You then have reference docs. These go into your reference MD file. They generally links off to other documents as well. You can have multiple of these. But they will give your skill more information, richer information about the things that it needs to know to run that skill. So for example, if I have a brand, if this is like my brand checker, I'll probably have our brand guidelines and any sort of rules that we have, and maybe some specific rules for a specific locale for things that we must have for this. And those will be loaded into my reference file. I'll then have a rules file, which basically documents your standards and your edge cases and your decisions that you need to make throughout, as well as scripts. And this is where skills really, really differentiate from prompts. So scripts are things that your app can actually run to validate the output. So when I mentioned earlier that I have an example of a set of skills, one of them will create the asset, one of them will validate the asset, and one of them will then fix that asset again. The scripts are really, really important in that validation step, because I can literally run checks that make sure that the hex codes that have been put into our presentations are exactly the ones that are inside our brand guidelines, and there's nothing missing. And I'm not relying on an AI to tell me that. I'm literally running scripts to check that. And so if you're working in data, if you've got anything to do with data, and you've got a skill that does things for you reliably, so go to this spreadsheet, go to this spreadsheet, pull out all the information, combine it together in this kind of format, everything that you've described in your skill.md, at the end, you could run a script that checks that information is true. So you've combined this and you've combined this. Let me run a quick check to make sure that that's true. Let me make sure that all of the fields have values in them. Let me make sure that whatever it is that potentially could have caused you to have to rerun that prompt or go back to Gemini again before or Claude before and say, no, this needs fixing. You could probably now write a script that can check that for you. And the lovely thing is, when these scripts run and they come back and they've failed, the agent will automatically try and fix that for you and then run the script again. So they're like self-fulfilling scripts. They are one of the biggest things that sets skills apart from just normal prompts. And then you have your templates and resources. So these are the things that in your skill.md file, you'll reference that the skill should use, the agent should use, and it will go off and it'll actually use those specific templates to create variants of based on what you've provided. So it could be an email template, could be an Excel document, could be a markdown file, could be any kind of template that you provide. But these are things that the agent will pick up and use and create copies of and then give you back the finished version. This is what really sets a skill apart from a prompt. A prompt cannot run scripts. A prompt can only rely on maybe things that you've uploaded for templates. A prompt obviously can have your codified rules, but you'll have to fill them in every single time. References, skills, all of that kind of stuff. It's filling up your context before you've even asked Gemini or Claude, say, a question. Whereas skills only get called when it makes sense, when the agent determines that there's a reason to call this, and therefore much less context used and much better outputs. And talking about context, there are 3 different things that Claude or Gemini or OpenAI, for example, will look at different stages. So level 1 is basically what all the agents will have access to. So for every skill that you have, it will have a name and a description. Those are 2 essential pieces of information to get right, because your agent is only going to know the name and the description to know if it should use this skill or not. If it determines that the skill's name or description aren't good enough, they don't make enough sense for the request that you've made, your skill is not going to be called. So if you find that your outputs are not good most of the time, it's probably that your name and your description of your skill aren't very good. And therefore, your agent isn't calling your skill, and it's just trying to solve the problem itself without that additional information. Once Claude decides that your skill should be called, it will then load in the instructions, and that will bring in the skill MD file, the steps to follow, the rules, and the workflow. And that is traditionally, sometimes that's where the agent will stop, where it determines maybe it doesn't need to look at the references or it doesn't need to run any scripts. However, then it will pull in the resources, and obviously the resources will only come in once the agent decides it needs them. So like when it comes to like a lot of what companies are now talking about, it's much less about token maxing and it's much more about token value. By using skills, you're reducing your overall requirement of tokens and you're bringing less information into your like context, and therefore the outputs that you get are going to be cheaper and also more efficient and faster and more structured. Yes. As I mentioned, the description is essential. So this description here, a PDF utility skill is a pretty useless description. This isn't going to get called because it's so generic. Claude will not want to call it for every single PDF activity it does, whereas a better description extract text and tables from PDFs, fill forms, merge documents, use when the user mentions PDFs, forms, or document extraction. It's much better, tells it when exactly to use it and what it should do. Most of the time, though, you won't be writing your own descriptions. It's just good to know because you may need to troubleshoot a skill of yours at some point in the future. It's also good to just have the understanding about how these things work. Then you've got the skill.md file. And as I said before, this is the most essential. Well, actually, this is the required file. All the others are optional. What this does is it not only gives you the name and the description, so this is where your name and your description will go from your skill file, but it also gives it the instructions. So these are written in Markdown. As I said before, they're like hyper lightweight. It's like hyper lightweight syntax. So like a hash is a big header, something that it should call out. Double hash is a slightly smaller header. Triple hash will be even smaller header. Yeah, and then just bullet points. So this is where you would document in your skill MD file, you're documenting what the steps are to get your thing done, and any kind of major context that it might need to be able to do a good job. Again, you probably won't be writing this, but I think it's useful to know what this file does. If we look at one of the examples, so I'm currently pitching to a company to make it so that they create a number of dashboards. This company currently manually does all the data mapping and a lot of the data cleaning and all the reconciliation of that data. What I've done is I've created the Claude plugin, which is like a set of skills that have some additional wrapping around them. I've got a slide on plugins later. That will do this activity on their behalf, and it will do it reliably. What have I got in my skill? So this is one of the skills, which is map to canonical schema. Again, I didn't build this, but I spoke to Claude about how it should build this and what it should build for me. But it put the judgment inside the skill MD file. So that is the confidence rules that live there, the to-do list, what good looks like, the fact that this should traditionally be done by an analyst, the stuff that you might normally put in your prompt today, let's say. Then in the references, it has documents that include the taxonomy of the files that it regularly looks at. So, and what the data types are, if they can be blank or not, that kind of stuff. So the stuff that the skill will reference regularly. The scripts, they run row counts to make sure that the calculations have actually been done correctly. They check the spend totals. They look for any orphan foreign keys. They check that things must be exact. Things that must be exact are exact. And then we've got the assets, which is the documentation, the assets that it's going to populate. So the templates it starts from. What makes a skill work well? Sharp scope. Do not create a Swiss Army skill, one that does 20 different things. As I said before, you can get skills to chain onto one another. So often what I might do is I will be working on something for a while in Claude. I'll then say to Claude, tell me the skills that I should create to be able to do this again. And then Claude will tell me which skills we should create and how many we should create. And it's incredibly rare that it will come back to me with just one skill, because skills should be very specific to a specific task. So if I have a step that is, if I'm thinking about creating a marketing email, there's a few stages to that. There is a stage that is to get the information from a brief, to turn that into an actual email asset. So leverage some of that information into an email asset. And then there's like a validation step to check that all the information is in there correctly and that the links work, etc. And that could be 3 different skills, all called from one another. So don't be creating these massive skills every time you're thinking about including skills in your workflows. Yes, descriptions should absolutely say what it needs to do and when it should use it. That's one of the most essential things to get your skills to actually work. Make sure your judgment is written down. So what you would do in certain situations should be written down in these skills. Again, you can coach your agents on how to do that. And yes, make sure that there is a clear bar for what good looks like. So provide it some examples of what good looks like in the skill.md file. We will get on to some more examples in a minute. I think I've pretty much just covered these, or at least I've mentioned these as we've been going. So no big skills, please. Keep them small. Having vague labels and descriptions will not help. Putting everything in a single file, one massive skill.md file, will mean that it's not producing these strict outputs. Guessing on maths, you now have the ability to use scripts inside your skills, so you absolutely should. And make sure that it's at least tested a few times with different inputs. So a skill is a workflow, not a one-liner. Here's an example. So we imagine like these are the stages of a strong skill. So we have a trigger. We need to tell our skill when to fire, and traditionally we put that now in the description. So when it should fire and what it should do. It will then go and gather information. So these skills traditionally will go off and find information to be able to act upon, or it will expect to be provided information. It will then decide on the rules and judgments to then be able to get to the output that it wants to create. And at any stage, by the way, in your skill, you can get it to speak back to you and provide you options of which way you want to move forward. So you can actually codify these skills to stop halfway through and ask you questions that help it actually finish the task. Then it'll do the work, then it'll check the work, importantly, before then handing off to you. And so my reason for putting this slide in here is when you're thinking about a skill, you're not just thinking about this bit in the middle, do the work, which is traditionally how a prompt works today. You're thinking about how this starts and then checking it, validating it, before then it gives it back to you. So you're leveraging the agent to self-correct and self-fix by using this skill. You should absolutely be making it so that your skills know what good looks like. So how do you make decisions? What looks good from your point of view? What it should do if something is missing? When it should stop? And you should be trying to get, generally, what I'll talk you through later, is what I try and get my agent to do, which is like quiz me on anything that it feels like it is missing from my particular skill. And quite often it'll be like, yeah, what should I do if there's missing data? Or where do I put this thing if this specific situation happens? Or when should I absolutely just stop and not keep going? So an example would be if a deal is over 50K, routed to a partner, if the source data is more than 7 days old, stop and say so. And this kind of thing should be written into your skills in that rules file. Again, you won't physically be writing these things, but just knowing how this works behind the scenes is generally quite useful. And by the way, this session is going to be more on the theory of skills, and the next session I will do a really hands-on exercise to basically build these things for yourselves. I'll show you a couple of the skills that I have as examples if there's time in this session. Yes, just wanted to reiterate, every single one of your skills should not only have that decision-making capability, because in prompts it's quite hard to codify that, whereas in skills it's much easier because it gets pulled in every time and you're not having to write it yourself each time. But also the checks, the things that should absolutely be validated every single time. And you can have a combination of two types of checks. You can have the codified checks, so the ones that sit in your scripts file that actually physically check numbers or colors or wording or output size, or that the document is even a PDF or whatever it is you wanted. Like all of those can be done. But also you can have AI judgment checks, and you can get the AI, the skill, to run through a like to do that is like validate that this sort of meets our 80% cutoff. And in the skill you can describe what that cutoff looks like. And again, with this stuff, the agent will pick up what fails and it will fix it before it even gets into your hands, which is the massive difference with just using prompts today. I've sort of already mentioned this one. So skills snap together. You can get one skill to call another skill to call another skill. So please don't make these massive giant skills. They should work in like specific. You want them to be as small as possible, but still be able to get to the output you want. An example of what we have, and I've referenced this a couple of times already, we have a skill called Algo Design that builds this deck, as you've seen. We then have another skill that gets called from Algo Design, that is the brand check, that checks contrast fonts, logo, voice, and if it's computed, all these things are computed, not eyeballed. And then we have a ship skill that pushes it to a place where I can then show it to you. All of that happens when I just say, create me a deck in Algo style. Actually, I don't even need that anymore because I've just written into my skill that it should assume that I want all of my decks created in Algo style. Create me a deck for skills, teaching people skills in agent with agents. And it will go off and it'll build me something that looks like this every time. And then it will check it and then it will set it live for me. Another example, this is the data example that I've set up for this company called Nectar IQ. If I was just using prompts to do this, I'd manually be providing the context every time, and I'd manually be telling it how to fix it every time, and I'd manually be telling it what it needs to do every time. Whereas by using skills, one of them is profile, which is like looking at how messy the data files are that have been provided by the third parties that they work with. The next one is clean, which normalizes the data, the dates, the currency, dedupes data. Then we've got mapping that data. That's the one skill that I broke down earlier in the deck. And then we've got validating the data, so checking that the information is definitely correct after we've now mapped it all together, before then building a dashboard for them. And traditionally, this would be very hard to do with the multiple prompts, and it would use up a hell of a lot of context. And it would be, I would need to rewrite these prompts every single time that I ran any new data through this process. But with these skills, we can like codify what makes sense to codify, and then keep things dynamic when it needs it. And the nice thing is we kick it off once at this top stage by providing it the files that we want to map together and the information that it potentially needs, and it gets all the other information it needs all the way down the workflow from the previous skill. So you can chain skills together. We then also have plugins. And so this is the thing that if you're in the Claude instance that Algo is currently offering to people that are taking the Claude exam, you'll notice in there that you'll have a plugin pre-installed called the Algo Brand Kit. This plugins are basically like sets of skills, but also the connectors, so the tools that these skills might connect to. So those could be pre-installed through these plugins. Any commands, so I could do a / and then I could run a specific command, and that command might run multiple skills at once, maybe even spin up 10 different agents at once. And then specialist sub-agents that you can create in there too. So like when you've gone through skills and you've created some skills for you and your team, it might be that eventually you get to the point where you have a plugin that everyone in your team installs, and now everyone not only has access to all the same skills, but now they're being prompted to connect these specific connectors to get data from their specific instances of tools. They all have the same / commands, so there might be a / command for create my weekly report, which is the same for everyone, but it's using your data from your MCP connectors. And then you might have specific agents. One of them might be sat in your chatbot, for example, that does stuff on your team's behalf. So plugins are like the next level up with even more information that you can configure. And yes, the best part about skills is that you don't have to write them by hand. So there are a few ways to create skills. You can literally go into Gemini now, or you can go into Claude or OpenAI, and you can tell it to create you a skill, and it will create all the files for you and then give you the option of downloading those and putting them in the right place, etc. One of the nice things that's literally just come out over the last week is in Claude, you can now record your screen and it will turn that into a skill for you. So you can record you doing something. So it might be like creating a PowerPoint presentation, or it might be clicking through Salesforce and adding a new opportunity to Salesforce. And what you will do is you will narrate as you're going, what you're doing, what decisions you're making, why you're making those decisions, and it will codify those for you into all the files that you saw. So it'll give you your to-do list and your skills.md file. It will codify the decisions you're making in your rules.md file. It'll write scripts for you that validate the outputs, like what the agent has actually done for you. It will do all of those things for you purely by you recording a video of what's happening. It will also try and get URLs that you've accessed through the recording and whereabouts you're clicking on the screen, and it will try and put all of that into this skill file. You can get there by going to inside Claude, bottom left-hand corner if you've got the desktop app or even on the web. You then go to settings and then I think connectors. And when you get into connectors, you get to like go to skills, and inside skills in the top right-hand corner, there is a add a skill. Inside there, you've got record. I'll probably share a different screen in a minute. I'll show you that. But that's probably the best way at the moment that you can create a skill. And so far, from what I've seen, it's been really, really, really good at creating these reliable outputs. So if you're doing something with data, it's very good in this instance too. If you can describe what you're doing with data, it can do these things on your behalf. If you're clicking through screens on web pages, if you're creating Word documents, if you're rewriting copy, whatever it may be, if you can try and codify, if you can try and tell an agent exactly what you're doing and the decisions you're making just by recording your screen, it will then create skills for you for that. You can, though, create skills in OpenAI and in Google. Skills currently sit in multiple places in OpenAI. So if you've got OpenAI, if you've got ChatGPT and you're on the web, you can add skills there purely by typing /skill or by going to the skills menu in the sidebar. There are also skills inside Codex, which is their coding tool. And you can download skills from a marketplace. So other people that have created these like repeatable skills, the same as for Claude. Inside Google, it's slightly different. Inside Spark, you can now create skills too. These will sit in your drive. They are they're not quite as good yet as Claude and OpenAI skills. I think they're still working on their kind of framework, but it still runs off the same core logic. And one thing to call out, if you've got the Ask Gemini button in your browser in the top right-hand corner, in there they have got something called skills. So like you can / and you can type in a skill name. But the only thing that does is it basically brings you in a prompt that you saved. It doesn't have the rules. It doesn't have the ability to run scripts. It doesn't have the ability to bring in any additional references. So they are basically just like prompt templates, even though they're called skills in that Ask Gemini section. So that's something to flag. So the validation and stuff, that's all going to be done by AI thinking that it's done the right things on the page as opposed to like physically checking it with scripts. So bear that in mind. Also, not everyone in the business has access to Google Gemini Spark at the moment. It's only available really to Google LDAP users. But soon it will be available to more people. I'll show you where to access skills in just a minute in my Claude. Yes, recording skill gives you a replay, but you still have to make it a skill. So like think about when you're doing this recording with Claude, rather than just recording the thing that you do once, like I click here and then I click here and I've done that, made that decision because of X, Y, or Z thing. Think about all the different cases in which you might be doing something, and then try and either speak to those cases or repeat the recording again before you finish this recording, saying this is another use case using the same kind of, doing the same kind of set of activities, but there's a whole different decision matrix that I go through. So as you're recording these skills, or as you're talking to Claude or Gemini or OpenAI to create a skill for you, think about the different cases in which you might be doing these things, just to make sure that it's rich enough to handle whatever it is that you may be throwing at it. Also tell it what is out of scope. So when should it not do something, or when should it stop doing something, and when should it absolutely not guess? Because these agents are going to try and complete the task. And quite often, and actually if you're doing the Claude exam, a tip for you, if there's ever something that says that a field can be populated or can't be populated, the AI will always try and populate it with something, even if it's something you don't want it populated with, because it's always trying to complete a task. It doesn't want to stop. So you have to make sure that you're telling it what is out of scope while you're recording those videos as well. 3 things to remember: build once, build your skill once, make sure you spend time thinking about what judgment the AI should make, and then chain those skills together rather than building one big chunky skill. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where I get to skills. I'll probably show you in Claude. I don't have access to Spark, so I can't show you in Spark, and so I'll show you what my skills look like in Claude. So let me share a different screen. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to
Sorry, look, I don't know if you mentioned this already, maybe I missed it. When, let's say, when I want to use a skill, like, do I have to do the slash command each time, or can it just pick up itself and automatically run it?
Great question. No, you don't. You used to have to use a slash command all the time, but actually what good skills will do is they'll be called when it makes sense for them to be called.
Yeah.
You get that judgment by putting in a really, really good name and description. The description should say when it should be called and what it should be called to do.
Nice, because I downloaded a skill today and I was looking, and in the description it said that, but then yeah, I need to still test it out. But I don't think all the skills have that section, so some needs to be, I guess, activated.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You can edit them as well. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. Is it, if I download a skill like from, let's say, GitHub or somewhere, can I go in and edit it? Like, do I have permissions to do that?
Depends how you've imported it. So you can just download it and upload it, and then yes, you would have the ability.
Okay. Yeah, that's how I've done it basically. Okay, cool.
If it's a marketplace skill, no, you have to rely on the person to update it for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So inside my Claude, it'll be similar in OpenAI. It'll be similar in, well, slightly less similar in Google, because they don't necessarily have this desktop experience yet. Actually, I do have Gemini desktop. Maybe it's in there. Maybe I'll have a look in there quickly if we've got time. Inside here, you see I have a number of different skills. Some of these things I do on a daily basis. So I will, sorry, Gemini's just opened. I have my daily note skill. This creates me a note in my Obsidian Vault, so my like note-taking app that has all my to-dos from yesterday and my to-dos that just managed to find in my Google Drive, my Google Chat, and in my emails. And it will automatically add those into my to-do list for me. That one gets called every single day. I have my deploy proposal skill, which will, when I have a new proposal to send to a client, it will automatically send it up to my Versal proposals domain and then give it a custom URL and then send that back to me. I've got my grill me skill. So if there's a particular thing that I need to hand over to someone else, I'll give this skill. So this skill will basically look at, I'll give it some context, and then it will relentlessly, as it says here, interview me to try and get every bit of information out of me, so that it'll then write me up a really nice report. So that would just continue to ask me questions until it feels like it's run out. I've got a skill creator skill, which if I ask Claude to create me a skill, it will run this skill. This is one is out of the box, installed for you by Anthropic, but this will tell it how to create skills and what kind of questions it should ask you. And you'll see here, that it has agents file, assets file, scripts files that validate all the outputs. So like, yes, skills can be really complicated, but generally you'll rely on AI to create these for you. That recording thing, if I go back to my settings, skills, I shouldn't really have left this. In the top right, you've got browse. This lets you look at the skills that Anthropic have created. I would suggest if you are using Claude, you probably installed the majority of these. A lot of these will be useful for you. Morning is an interesting one. But there was also, if I leave this, inside add, you can create with Claude. So this is like that, create a skill. Create me a skill. If I click this, it's just going to open up a new window and pre-populate it with use the skill, create a skill for me. Or I can write skill instructions, which will just open up another window for me that lets me write some simple instructions. I would suggest you don't do that. You can upload a skill. So if you go onto GitHub and you search for marketing skills, you'll probably find loads of different marketing skills. I think I've probably downloaded a couple. This one here, GitHub Gem Seeker. This looks for specific GitHub profile, GitHub code sets that my agents can use based on what's worked really well for other people in the past. I got that one online. Or you can record your screen, and this records your screen and what you've done, and that'll turn that into a skill for you. I'd suggest this is probably the best way for you to create skills at this point in time if you're using Claude. And even if you're not using Claude, it'll still create a great skill for you that you can then export and then put into the tool of your choice. So yes. My daily note, I will happily share it. You might need to tweak it and change it because obviously it uses I have a custom MCP server set up for Obsidian where my agent can access my notes, etc.
Yeah, I'll change those bits, but we talked about before, like getting the Google Chat tasks to somewhere. So yeah, I'm specifically interested in that one.
Cool. I've had to do a serious workaround for that as well, by the way. But anyway, I'll cover that. Connectors, you would have seen, these are like MCP servers. They let you connect to other services. And plugins, this is where I've created these groups of skills that team members will automatically have installed automatically. So the Algo Marketing Toolkit, this includes a set of skills. So Algo Design, Algo Style, Brand Check, Grill Me, Human in the Loop, Humanizer, and Ship. And the plugin will determine when these get called based on the prompt that I put into the model. An example of using a skill, I created one down the left-hand side here. This is a skill that I randomly chose from a list of skills that were pre-installed in Anthropic. I just said, can you find me some really interesting Claude skills that I can install to demo how skills work? Funny, interesting, multi-step, etc. would be great. It came back basically saying there's some great ones out of the box. Maybe you want to try this algorithmic art one. And what that does is it creates for you a dashboard that is creating art. And I just said / algorithmic art, create me something cool. And now what algorithm, if I just said that, obviously as a normal prompt without the / or if I said use algorithmic art to create me something cool, it would then use this skill. That loaded in all of this additional information about what good looks like, how it should do it, what library it should use, what kind of functions it should write, etc., 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 what resources it has access to. And it's got 2 templates that it leverages. So this generator template, which is basically what this is. To create me something cool by using literally this much information. And this is what it created. Let's see if I can get this to run. Maybe this won't run now. But it was pretty when it ran. Let me try opening this. And I'll need to share the screen, won't I? But what I wanted to just show was like just how much information you can put into skills with you putting in very little effort to get it to do things on your behalf. So yeah, this just like creates this art from algorithms. So like you can change all these fields and values, and what the skill does is it gives it a format to work within. But if I ran this again, with a different prompt saying, no, I don't want it to look like coral, I want it to make pictures of dogs, it would use the same structure, the same format to create me something that is still using this kind of template, but the output is totally different. So yeah, I just want to show a quick example of like how much information could be brought into a skill and how little I could write to get such a like robust output. I think that's everything I want to share today. In the next session, we will physically create some skills together, or maybe we'll download some skills together and we will try them out and see what kind of outputs we get together. Like it'll be a very hands-on session, that one. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was just the difference between prompts and how prompts can be really, really limited, and skills, which can be chained together with really, really rich information within them that can actually validate the outputs that you're getting created for you, and they can self-diagnose and fix any issues before you even see the output. It's such a different way of working than just writing a prompt and then having to get it to update itself and update itself and update itself. So if you find that you're doing the same thing regularly, and yes, maybe ideally you've already got a prompt written that you use regularly, I'd suggest trying to shift that into a skill. And don't write the code for the skill. Just go to your agent and say, can you turn this into a skill for me? And it will do an incredible job of that. And then just coach it as to what good looks like. And then send me a message telling me that you've done it, because I'd love to know that you've done it and what kind of difference it's made for you. Yeah. Any questions before we finish?
I think from me, but it was great. Thank you, Luke.
Amazing.
Oh, sorry. Okay, before actually one more question. What is the ideal amount of skills to have? Like, is there too many? Will that create a confusion if there are two skills that's like kind of doing the same thing?
Yes. So if you've got multiple skills doing the same thing, then you've not done something right. If you've got two skills that do the same thing, but the output is very different, so like maybe they both ingest all this data, but the output for a CMO is very different from the output from an analyst, you could combine a set of those skills together and just have different skills at the end. So one for the CMO or one for the analyst. But generally, you don't want your skills names and descriptions to overlap. Like ideally, you want one skill for a certain type of activity so that your AI knows which one to call. Or you just need to be more descriptive in how you prompt. But the ideal is you can prompt as little as possible to get to the richest output as possible to save you time, effort, energy. Yeah. So to give another example, if I had two skills that opened PDFs and took the information from those, I would have no control unless I physically typed / specific skill name as to which one it might choose, because it would decide whichever one it wanted to choose at the time, and I would have no control.
Got it. Thank you so much.
But you could have 1,000 skills, and
Yeah.
as long as they're all different.
Yeah. Is the GitHub the best place to look for those, or do you recommend any other place that you often look, like a library?
No, I would say I would go to GitHub, but to be honest, I would go to Claude first, and I'd get Claude to search for me reputable skills that do the specific activity that I want it to do, rather than going out completely blind. And I wouldn't necessarily just go onto the web and try and find a ton of skills that other people have, because at the end of the day, if you're hyper aware of what you're doing, you should naturally be able to spot the opportunities for skills in your workflow. And obviously that's what's going to make the biggest difference for you. But if there is something that is quite generalist, like prepare me for my day, There's probably some very good examples of those on the web, but most of the things we do is slightly specific, isn't it? So
Okay. Amazing.
yeah, it's a great resource though. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and hopefully that was useful. Please do, as always, provide me any feedback. Feel free to provide it through someone else so that you remain anonymous. I'm always happy for positive or, well, actually, I prefer negative feedback because then I can work on something. I'm not very good at taking positive feedback. So yeah, maybe keep that one to yourself, but tell me what you want me to change to make these things better in the future. Cool. Thanks, everyone. And hopefully I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
See you later.